Today's edition of NBA Now is sponsored by Mint Mobile. They are changing the game in cell phone wireless coverage with plans starting as low as $15 a month, and it all runs on the largest 5G network. Start saving today by making the switch over to mintmobile.com/chatsports. The question of the day and the story right now around the NBA, the number one story, is the future of one Donovan Mitchell. So we'll ask you this first, then come back to it later on in today's video. Will Donovan Mitchell be traded? Y for yes, N for no. Get those answers in for me at the pinned comments. Here's the latest on Donovan Mitchell. The report out of Utah, emphasis on the location, is that the Jazz and Knicks are not close to a deal, which maybe shouldn't be a huge surprise given, that this has been going on for weeks and feels like months now, even though it's not that long. Another report from HoopsHype is that the Jazz, Knicks, and Lakers had talks about a 3-team deal, but clearly that failed, did not come to fruition. We'll come back to that more in depth later on. But as things sit with the Jazz and Knicks specifically, no rush to make a trade. Here's what Tony Jones, the Athletic reporter, said, quote, "I don't think the two sides are close. I don't think they've been close. We'll see what happens as the urgency of training camp looms. The Jazz want what they want, which is picks out of this deal, and they want young guys on short or rookie contracts." That means not R.J. Barrett. The sense I get right now is it's probably not going to happen on an imminent level. The two sides aren't close. To me, I think if it's going to happen, it's going to happen closer to training camp or the start of the season. If it doesn't happen then, we'll see what happens closer to the February trade deadline. The betting odds as we sit right now on Mitchell's next team. The Utah Jazz are still the favorites, minus 130. Then there are the New York Knicks at plus 175, and a big gap, understandably so, beyond those two teams. The Brooklyn Nets are plus 500, and the Raptors are plus 800. Now, it's not a huge surprise with the way that the Knicks have so much interest in Donovan Mitchell because, he'd be the best player they've had in the last star guard they had since the brief insanity run. Stephon Marbury, maybe? This is a 20-plus per game bucket getter with ease, who's a pretty efficient scorer. Not an elite defender, but he scores buckets in bunches. So Mitchell, outside of Kevin Durant, as I think maybe almost feels like both sides waiting on the other to make the first move, / maybe the Nets are just going to let Durant and Irving, roll it back for one more year in Brooklyn. Mitchell is the one that I think the Knicks are waiting on, but beyond New York, there aren't many teams that can actually match the desired offer the Jazz are chasing, a bunch of picks and or young players. So back to our pin question of the day. Will Donovan Mitchell be traded? Y for yes, N for no. Like I've mentioned, it's the pin comment. So what that means is if an ad break comes here on YouTube, go take advantage of it. Head down to that pin comment, type in Y for yes or N for no. Now, HoopsHype, to come back to the 3-team trade, they mentioned this, and there's a lot of moving pieces here, and it kind of falls into a similar category we've seen in the past. The alleged 3-team trade talks that went down, and there's a lot of other salary filler stuff to get balanced out here, so general approach. Knicks get Donovan Mitchell, Jazz get Russell Westbrook, and a bunch of draft picks from the Knicks and Lakers, and probably some young pieces as well from New York. The Lakers get, Patrick Beverley or Jordan Clarkson or Bojan Bogdanovic or Malik Beasley or maybe Cam Reddish, as the Knicks are not sold on Reddish. I don't think he fits what the Jazz want, and since the Knicks traded for him to deal with the Hawks last year, Reddish was not good in New York. 6.1 points per game. Had a tough time getting on the court. The thing that I come back to, though, with that 3-team trade, why are the Lakers getting good assets for Russell Westbrook? Every Lakers trade you see, it's kind of like, yeah, but why would the other team help the Lakers out? That's what I keep coming back to on those potential deals. So I'm not surprised it didn't go anywhere. I feel like the Lakers would only be able to ship off Russ if the Jazz, hypothetically, if they're eating a bunch of, if the Lakers are giving up draft capital. And I mean big capital to move on from Russ because that contract, unfortunately, is a net negative at this point. Now, what's not a negative is Mint Mobile. Unlimited talk and text, high-speed data for as low as $15 a month. Unlimited premium wireless on the largest 5G network. If you're like me, you've been hit hard by inflation because that sucks and it's not fun, and things cost more than what they used to, and I don't like that. I know I sound old saying it, but it's true. Mint Mobile, though, they're changing the game. Owned by Ryan Reynolds, the switch is easy thanks to their eSIM cards, so make it just like I did. Head over mintmobile.com/chatsports. Links in the comments and the description, and make the switch today. And yes, you can keep your number and your cell phone as well at mintmobile.com/chatsports. More now on the Utah Jazz. This part makes sense. The report from HoopsHype was if the Jazz could have a fire sale if they trade away Donovan Mitchell. Well, of course, right? Not only is that the next logical step, it's the only next step for Utah. Keeping a bunch of veterans who are older doesn't benefit them if they don't have Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell. Here's what Michael Scotto of HoopsHype wrote. Quote, should Mitchell be traded, rival NBA execs believe a fire sale will happen immediately in Utah, signaling the start of a long-term rebuild. Playoff caliber teams are monitoring Bojan Bogdanovic. They're monitoring and Patrick Beverley, with both players entering contract seasons, league sources told HoopsHype. In addition to those two guys, HoopsHype also mentioned as kind of part of the Lakers stuff, so we'll keep it all together here, other potential trade chips: Bogdanovic, Beverley, Malik Beasley, Jordan Clarkson, and to an extent, Mike Conley. Now, Conley's owed $47 million over the next 2 years, but not all of that is guaranteed. He's got a $22.6 million cap hit next year and a partial guarantee of $14.3 after that. Wouldn't it make sense, by the way, in that hypothetical 3-team trade for the Lakers, if Conley's the one who ended up in L.A., continuing the all-oldish team in L.A.? Peak LeBron and Peak Conley would have been an awesome duo. Now, I think Conley's value is fairly low. Now, when it comes to the Jazz as an organization, what should they do? Type T for tank or type in W for try to win, most likely with Donovan Mitchell? Sound off in the comments section. I think it's tank. D-Mitch will will them to around the 8-7 seed maybe in the West, but you trade away Gobert. You don't really have a true dynamic 4. Maybe Jared Vanderbilt will be that for you long term. Bogdanovic and Mitchell is a decent-ish 1-2 punch. Hopefully Walker Kessler emerges, but just looking at this team long term, aren't you better off trading away Mitchell and rebuilding and letting Trader Danny get all those picks and do with the things that Trader Danny always does of maximize his trade assets and everything? So I'm not anti-Mitchell, obviously, but I think organizationally, time for the Jazz to tank a little bit. Now, if you want more NBA videos this offseason and in the training camp and the regular season, of course, and the playoffs, and then back around again for the offseason, hit that big red button and subscribe. Don't miss out on any of our free NBA YouTube coverage. Let's talk Myles Turner trade again. Nothing is more indicative of the flat circle that exists for the NBA trade rumors than Myles Turner. Swear to God, he's been linked in trade rumors for his entire career. Every year it's like, could Turner be traded? It's possible. The Pacers once again could shop him as they enter what I think is a bit of a rebuilding year. And not to mention they tried to sign DeAndre Ayton, which I thought was a pretty clear sign that they don't love Turner the way that I'm a huge fan of Myles Turner. This roster does have some intriguing young pieces. I like Benedict Mathurin a lot. Tyrese Halliburton, Smith flashed a little bit last year as well. And I like Turner, but it just seems like the Pacers aren't sold on him the same way that others like myself are at this particular moment. So I like Turner. I think he's a perfect modern big man. Not an elite scorer, but he can stretch the floor a little bit, is an awesome shot blocker at center as well. Yes, he was banged up last year. I think Turner has been an underrated player. He's 26 years old, and he costs $18 million right now. I think there are a lot of teams that should have interest, yet not the case at this point. So make your predictions. Where will Myles Turner play this year? Is it in Indiana or somewhere else altogether? Shoot your shot. Make those predictions for me right now. Let's talk Kenyon Martin Jr., a.k.a. KJ Martin. He requested a trade back in June, and HoopsHype says there is interest right now from other teams in acquiring the Rockets forward. Now, I don't think the trade value is all that high for Martin. I don't think there's a list of teams breaking down the door to acquire him, and maybe it makes more sense as a trade deadline piece. But he did flash a little bit last year in Houston. 8.8 points per game. It's a lot of 8 points. 35.7% from three-point range. He's not a bad player. I think he's more of a low-end rotation guy. The issue for Houston, they don't need him that much anymore. They've got Jayshawn Tate. They've got Tari Eason. They've got Jabari Smith. Those three, and got Garrison Matthews kind of sort of too. Not to mention you could figure out something with other wingmen like Josh Christopher playing some of the three potentially. I don't think you need Martin the same way maybe you would have before drafting both Smith and Eason in the first round this year. So I would not be surprised, given the forward depth Houston has, if they move on from Kenyon Martin. Maybe they get a draft pick back potentially. I mean, we saw Royce O'Neal go for a first. A little bit surprised by that one. That's Trader Danny, though. Maybe not quite that much, but maybe that's a decent baseline for a potential trade for a young piece who I think could be a good rotation player somewhere other than Houston.